The Stonecutter. When Taro was a little boy, he said, "If I ever grow up to be a stonecutter and can go up with the men in the morning and cut the great rocks from the mountainside, I shall be happy." Years went by and Taro grew big and strong. One morning he took his hammer and set out with the men to climb the mountain and cut the rock from the mountainside. It was a happy day for Taro. All day he swung his heavy hammer and laughed to see the great rock break and the chips fly about him. All day he worked in the hot sun, and he sang as he worked. At night time he came down the mountain, tired and happy. He was glad to eat the simple supper and go to bed. And for many days he worked and sang, but as time went on, he was not so happy. He grew tired of rising before the sun and climbing the mountain through the cold morning mist. As he toiled, the hot sun beat down upon his back. The hammer blistered his hands. The sharp chips cut his face. He no longer sang at his work. Taro was tired of being a stonecutter. One day when he had a holiday, Taro went into town. At noon he stopped to rest before a large house that stood in the midst of a beautiful rose garden. The door of the house opened and a man came out. He was dressed in fine silks, as soft as spiders' webs and colored like the rainbow. Jewels sparkled on his hands. Taro watched him pick the roses and drop them into a great basket carried by a servant at his side. "Ah me," said Taro to himself, "this must be a very rich man." As he walked along the stony road that night, he looked at his blistered hands and thought of the rich man's jeweled fingers. When he came to his little hut at the foot of the mountain, he thought of the rich man's house and the mist of the gardens. He looked up the mountain, where far above him the spirit of the mountain dwelt among the clouds and mists. He thought of how he must rise the next morning before the sun and climb up there to work all day in the burning heat. "Oh, spirit of the mountain," cried Taro, "make me a rich man too, so that I may wear silks as fine as spiders' webs, and live in a beautiful house and walk in rose gardens. Then I shall be happy." The spirit of the mountain heard and smiled. That very night the little hut vanished. In its place stood a large house in the midst of rose gardens. Taro was now a very rich man. He no longer had to rise before the sun and climb the steep mountainside. He no longer had to bend all day over his work while the hot sun beat down upon his head. He could walk all day in his rose garden if he wished. But he soon became very tired of it. One day, as he stood looking over his garden wall, a golden chariot came dashing by. It was drawn by 6 white horses with golden harnesses glittering in the sun. A coachman dressed in white and gold sat up on the seat in front and cracked a golden whip. In the chariot sat a prince dressed in purple and cloth of gold. Over his head there was a golden umbrella to shade him from the sun, and a servant ran beside him to fan him with a golden fan. "So this is the prince," said Taro to himself. "He is far greater than I. He rules the land for miles about. He rides in a golden chariot with a golden umbrella over his hand, and a servant fans him with a golden fan." Then Taro cried to the spirit of the mountain, "Oh, spirit, I'm tired of being a rich man walking in my rose gardens. Make me a prince who rules the land. Let me ride a golden chariot with golden umbrella over my hand, and a servant to fan me with a golden fan. Then I shall surely be happy." Again the spirit of the mountain heard and smiled, and again Taro had his wish. In the blink of an eye he became a prince. He lived in a fine palace. He had servants dressed in white and gold, and he rode in a golden chariot with a golden umbrella over his head. He ruled the country round about, and rich and poor obeyed him. "There is no one so great as I am," he cried. "Now I am truly happy." One hot summer day Taro rode through his lands in his golden chariot. The flowers drooped by the wayside, the fields were dry and brown. He looked up at the hot sun that poured its rays on the dry ground. "The sun is greater than I am," cried Taro in sorrow. "O spirit of the mountain, what pleasure is it to be a prince and rule the land and ride in a golden chariot with a golden umbrella over my head. The sun will not obey me. I wish I were the sun. Then I should indeed be happy." In an instant he was the sun. He laughed as he sent his rays down upon the backs of the poor stone cutters on the mountain. He laughed as he saw the roses wither in the rich man's garden and the princes try in vain to keep cool under their golden umbrellas.